Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending. Um, I wanted to talk today a little bit about why honeybees are important for us and why you should care about them. So notice I have my wife, Ellen Codd, on here as a co-author. She contributed a lot to, she said my talk was not strong enough in what you could and should do. So she boosted it up a little bit. So I'm going to give you the answer first, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about why. So honeybees are very important for our food supply. And I'm going to tell you why they're so important. So you probably know that naturally bees live in hollow trees. And you may even know that in olden days, especially in Europe, Northern Europe, bees were kept in woven baskets called skeps. And in the center here, you see a modern beehive. So what's in that beehive? So if we look inside, this is a skep. We're looking at the bottom of the skep here. And inside the skep, or inside a modern beehive, or inside a hollow tree, bees are going to construct their nest. And this nest is constructed out of beeswax. So the bees secrete wax from their bodies when they consume food and build it into wax. Now, one of the things that, I think I have a pointer, here's the pointer. One of the things that you should notice in this is that the combs, the honeycombs, are not randomly placed in the skep, but they are placed with a certain distance between them. So bees follow, they have strict rules about a lot of things. And one of the challenges in being a beekeeper is not to violate those rules. The bees won't like it, and you won't like it. And the other thing to notice inside this skep, if we look at the outside, you see that the straw is kind of a pale yellow. And inside, you may notice that there is a brownish, reddish material. Bees collect and use their own medicine, and it's called propolis, and they coat the inside of their nest with that, and it helps keep bacteria and fungi at bay. So who's in the hive? So we have to look at the family. So in the family, we're going to have here on the right, the queen, and she is the mother of all the bees in the hive. And on the left, we have another type of female called the worker. And in the center, we have the male, which is called a drone. In a normal functioning beehive, there is one queen, and that queen is the mother of all the bees in that colony, and that can be a lot of bees. In the height of summer, right around now, there can be 50,000 bees as part of one family, and 99% of those bees are workers, which are essentially non-reproductive females. And there are also, this time of year, some drones, the males, but drones serve at the pleasure of the females. So there will be drones in the colonies when there is a possibility that the hive may need a male to fertilize the queen. But come fall, all the drones will get kicked out, and there will be no males in the colony until sometime the following spring. You're never going to see a drone on a flower. They don't collect any nectar. And you're never going to see a queen on a flower. They are not nectar collectors either. The only bees, honeybees, that you're going to see on a flower are the worker bees. And the worker bees, as the name suggests, do all the work except lay eggs. So the honeybee develops what we call complete metamorphosis. So there is an egg that the queen lays. In 3 days, that egg hatches, and her sisters then feed that resulting larva. The queen does nothing more than lays the egg. She does not feed the young whatsoever. She usually doesn't even feed herself. She usually depends on her daughters to feed her. And in a few days, the larva gets very big and stretches out in the cell and proceeds to spin a cocoon. But before they spin the cocoon, her sisters actually put a sort of wax cap over the end of the cell. And then the larva proceeds to undergo metamorphosis, where they change body form from this larval grub-like stage into the adult stage. And once they have completed their metamorphosis, they chew their way out of their cocoon and out of their wax cap and emerge. And within an hour or two of coming out of their cocoon, they immediately get to work. So if we look at this a different way, on the left, we see an egg laid by the queen. 3 days, as I mentioned, the egg hatches, get a very tiny little larva, and they grow and they grow and they grow. In about 5 or 6 days, they get to be almost too big for the cell. They then, in the upper right, stretch out along the length of the cell, spin their cocoon, and then proceed to undergo the bodily transformation. So one of the reasons that I'm telling you this is because what you have to understand is that all the bees in one hive, so the hive is actually the box, all the bees in one colony, so that is the family of bees inside the box or inside the tree, are actually part of one organism. We call it a superorganism. So just like if you think about your body, you're one individual, but your body is made up of many, many different cells. And a honeybee colony is one individual made up of many, many bees. And each bee, just like each cell in your body, has a particular task that they have to perform for you to survive or for the colony to survive. And just like, except under special scientific purposes, we can't take cells of our body and have them survive very long. And we can't take a bee away from its colony and have it survive very long. So the whole colony has to live or die together. Now, honeybees and their babies, like all organisms, need food. And they need the same type of nutrients that we do. So they need some carbohydrates, some sugar. They need some lipids, which we call fats. They need protein made up of amino acids. They need various vitamins, and they need some minerals. So what you have to understand is that honeybees do not hibernate. You know, bears hibernate so that they get fat in the fall and then essentially sleep, a type of sleep all winter. So they don't have to eat any food because there's probably not much food for them all winter long. Honeybees don't hibernate. So that means that they need food all year long, even though in the wintertime, there are probably no flowers. So honeybees are vegetarians. All of their nutrition must come from plants, and particularly they come from flowers. So honeybees are not insects that eat plants. They gather food from the flowers. So they need to have flowers all year long. They don't have any in the wintertime, so that means that they have to store some food. So one of the foods that they store for the winter, we call it honey. So the plants and the flowers have sort of an agreement. And I'll talk about that in a second. But plants have a little gland in the base of their flower, most flowers do, that secretes a tiny drop of sugar water. And the bees go into that flower and suck up that little drop of sugar water, and they're going to convert that sugar water into honey. So honey is one of the foods that they store to help them have a food source all winter long. And the beautiful thing about honey is it's self-preserving. As long as it doesn't pick up humidity from the air, moisture from the air, it is stable for years. And if you have honey in your kitchen, you probably know that you should keep a lid on the honey jar so it doesn't pick up moisture. The bees don't have jars and they don't have lids, but they have beeswax, so they can put a beeswax cap over top of the cells containing the honey, and then the honey will last them all winter or even longer potentially. But what about the other sources of nutrition that bees need? Remember, we mentioned that they need fats, they need proteins, vitamins, and minerals. So, as I said, honeybees are vegetarian and they don't eat plants, they go to the flowers. So one of the things that they're going to collect from the flowers are pollen. And pollen is a critical source of nutrients, especially fats and proteins for honeybees, because for their babies to grow, they need a lot of fat and protein. So here's a picture of a honeybee. And if you watch bees on flowers, you may see that on their back legs, they may have a ball of material, different colors. This one is yellow. Sometimes it's greenish. Sometimes it's reddish. There's some, the red horse chestnuts, for example, the pollen that they collect is ruby red, really is a pretty color. So the bees are going to the flower here and collecting that pollen to take home as food. And they will store some of this pollen for rainy days and for overwinter. And you probably know that a lot of foods that we like, we can put them in the refrigerator and preserve them. But if you don't have a refrigerator, one of the ways that we store food is to ferment it. You know, think of yogurt or sauerkraut, those kinds of things. And so honeybees actually ferment some of that pollen to preserve it for the winter. And in this picture here, you see that the bees have collected pollens of several different colors. And that's very important because just like for us, no single food source will contain all the nutrients that they need. And honeybees really need to collect pollen from a wide variety of plants indicated by the different pollen colors here to ensure that they get all the nutrition that they need. For us, the important thing about the bees are that as they gather their pollen for food, they are actually performing a very important function for the plants. They are performing what's called pollination. So pollination is the transfer of the pollen from the male part of the flower to the female part of the flower so that the plant can have babies. And we usually call those babies fruits. Okay, so here's a little cartoon diagram where the pollen is coming from the anther here and being transferred over to the stigma here. And the pollen, it's a little more complicated, of course, but for the purposes of this talk, we can think of pollen as essentially the sperm from the flower that's going to fertilize the egg and then give rise to the seed and the fruit for the plant. So this is an important collaborative relationship between plants and bees. And the plant provides the honeybees with the nectar. We already talked about how the bees convert that nectar into honey. And then they also collect the pollen, which they're going to take home for food, but they also move some pollen from plant to plant. Now, honeybees, because they have this special relationship, this collaborative relationship with the flowers, when a honeybee goes out to collect pollen, she doesn't collect pollen from every flower that she sees on her trip. She will stick to collecting pollen from a single type of flower. Say if she goes for apples, she's not going to deviate from apples and go to some other flower. And that is very important for the plant because, of course, if she goes to something like a dandelion and then goes to an apple flower, it doesn't do the apple flower any good to get pollen from a dandelion, and it doesn't do the dandelion any good to get pollen from an apple flower. So the honeybee works a single type of flower on each foraging trip. So that promotes then reproduction of the plant and encourages more of those plants in the bees' environments. Now, there are many other types of bees besides honeybees that are excellent pollinators. You've probably seen the bumblebees around. And if you have a garden and you have some tomatoes, bumblebees are very important because honeybees can't pollinate tomatoes, but bumblebees can. And then there are many other types of bees, such as the mason bee that I show here, or these beautiful blue orchard bees. And sometimes you'll see little bees that are kind of a very metallic green, etc. And some leafcutter bees, among many others. So there are lots of important insects that are pollinators. But I'll tell you why honeybees have a special place in our food supply. Now, one note, yellow jackets, I know that some people think that anything that flies and stings is a bee, but yellow jackets are not bees. They're in a totally different genus. They're wasps, and they do not affect pollination, or very, very little, but they're not all bad because they will eat some insects like mosquitoes, but basically I don't have a very good relationship with yellow jackets. And you probably heard people, maybe you've even said it yourself, that in the end of August or early September, you say, geez, we were trying to have a picnic and the damn bees were bothering us. If that bee, in quotes, was trying to get to your hot dog or your hamburger or something like that, it's not a honeybee. Honeybees are strict vegetarians and they could care less about any meat products. Plus, the other thing is that yellow jackets are bright yellow with black markings. Our little honeybee here is a much duller coloration. She's usually sort of darkish brown. She may have some stripes, but she's not a show-off like the yellow jacket. So please educate people that yellow jackets are not bees. Okay, so pollination is the honeybee's most valuable service to mankind. So these estimates are hard to come by. This is a little out of date now, but Diana Cox Foster, some years ago, when she was at Penn State University, estimated that the economic value of honeybee pollination was in the neighborhood of $15 billion annually. This is a statement that gets thrown around a lot. I haven't seen any real scientific data to support it, but it's probably true that 1/3 of our diet directly or indirectly results from honeybee pollination. So let's examine that a little bit further. Why are honeybees, among all the bees, why are they so important as pollinators? Well, one, honeybees are very adaptable. We can keep them in the hives. I showed you a picture of a hive, and here you see hives being loaded onto a flatbed truck. And they are adaptable. You can put them on that truck. You can take them a few miles or across the country. You set them down and you open them back up. In a few hours, they have oriented to their new environment and they're out collecting food and performing pollination. One extreme example are almonds. So California is the world's largest almond producing area. And to produce almonds, you need pollination. And estimated 2 million beehives are taken from across the entire United States to go to California to pollinate almonds each February. And I have heard rumors, but I haven't heard it confirmed yet, that there was actually somewhat of a shortage of bees, honeybees this year for almond pollination. So that's one advantage, is that they're adaptable. We can move them around to where we need them. I mentioned that honeybees don't hibernate, so they need food all winter long, all year long. But the other advantage of them not pollinating is that they have a relatively large population in the spring. So a colony that goes to California to pollinate almonds in February will have 10 to 15,000 bees in that colony, so that they have a good, strong workforce to go out and pollinate the flowers. A lot of the native pollinators, such as our bumblebees pictured here, they do hibernate. And their life cycle is such that in the fall, they make real males and real females. And the females then hibernate. All the rest of the bees, the worker bumblebees and the male bumblebees, they die off. And in the spring, if she's lucky, that fertilized female bumblebee comes out of hibernation and starts a new colony. So by definition, each spring, a bumblebee colony has only one individual, and the population of that colony grows all summer long. And at the peak, there may be 300 or 400 bumblebees in that nest. Compare that to 50,000 honeybees. So even though bumblebees are extremely good pollinators, they can't keep up with the demand that we as humans place on them. Honeybees have additional characteristics that make them very effective pollinators. One of the most important things is that honeybees talk to each other. They have a symbolic language called the dance language. Carl von Frisch got the Nobel Prize in the 70s for essentially decoding the dance language. And so what that means is that when bees go out and discover new patch of flowers, she can come back and tell her sisters, you know, you go out a quarter of a mile, you turn left, and you're going to come to this great patch of flowers, and that's a good place for getting food. So that's very important. The other thing is that honeybees see colors. Many flowers, as you know, we love flowers. We love flowers because they're pretty. They have various colors. Honeybees can see those colors and they are attracted to the flowers. And we also like flowers because they smell good. Well, honeybees don't have a nose, but they have antennae and they can detect the odors just like we can. So the colors and the odors are very important in attracting honeybees to the crops that need to be pollinated. So flowers attract pollinators, honeybees and native bees with colorful petals, with odors, with sugar water, and with pollen. And as you know, there are many, many different types of flowers, different shapes, different colors, different odors. And here is one of those beautiful little green native bees that I was talking about. Now, so besides almonds, what do honeybees pollinate? And they pollinate a lot of fruits that we eat. So right now, you know, we're getting a lot of summer fruits. We're getting cherries, we're getting peaches, blueberries are starting to come in. All these things are pollinated by honeybees. Some of the fruits we call vegetables, such as cucumbers and eggplants, etc. And bees are excellent pollinators of these, although for cucumbers and pumpkins and others in the squash family, there are actually what are called squash bees that do a fantastic job pollinating. Unfortunately, there are not enough of them to really do all the pollination that we need. Mentioned that honeybees are important for almond pollination. They're also important for the pollination of other nuts. And even though we may not eat some of the plants that honeybees work, the pollination is very important for seed production. And so if you plant seeds in your garden, some of those seeds were probably derived from flowers that honeybees pollinated. And of course, there are oils like safflower and sunflower, flax oil, sesame oil. These are obtained from the seeds that honeybees help pollinate. So for example, canola oil, the canola, beautiful yellow flowers, and you go to where they grow canola in parts of Canada, there will be mile upon mile of canola plants waiting for honeybees to pollinate them. So this is from Whole Foods. So this is a Whole Food store someplace, highlighting the fruit and vegetable part of their grocery store. And if you look at this picture here, you say that there are a lot of fruits and vegetables available. And if you go to your grocery store, you'll see a similar type of display. And then Whole Foods came through and took away all the fruits and vegetables that depend on honeybees for pollination. And this is symbolized by all the empty areas where fruits and vegetables would be displayed. So when you go grocery shopping for your fruits and vegetables, you should be thanking honeybees for the wide variety. Now, some of you may be saying, well, I see oranges in the picture, and I've heard of orange blossom honey. Why are the oranges still there? Well, it's true that honeybees do collect nectar and make orange blossom honey. However, oranges don't need honeybees to set oranges. In fact, a few years ago, there was a big lawsuit. Some grower, some orchardist was trying to produce seedless oranges. Some beekeeper moved bees near, not on, but near the orchard, and those bees were pollinating the oranges. So the oranges were no longer seedless because the honeybees had pollinated them. And I don't know the outcome of the lawsuit, but there was a big lawsuit where the orange grower was suing the beekeeper for messing up his seedless oranges. Anyway, enough about oranges. Now, we've been talking, as humans, we're always self-centered. We've been talking about food for us. Well, bees also contribute food for wildlife, and they pollinate the flowers in our flower beds as well, so that we have more flowers the following season. And of course, some of the things that they pollinate become food for birds and other animals. I stole this picture of this bird. I'm not a birder, so I don't know what kind of bird it is, with that winterberry in its mouth. I just thought that was a hilarious picture. So that's the good news. But the bad news is that bees are dying. It varies from year to year, but beekeepers lose a lot of their colonies every year. For 2019 to 2020, it was a whopping 44% of the colonies that were dying. An amazing loss, and that's going to result in shortage of bees for pollination. But not only are honeybees dying, but native pollinators, you know, those beautiful blue and green bees that I showed you earlier, as well as the bumblebees, are also in decline. So why is that happening? One, farming is changing. So we no longer have many little small family farms of 100 acres or two, where the farmer was a generalist and may have several different crops. We're going more and more to industrial scale farms that specialize in a single crop. Another big problem are pesticides. Pesticides are becoming much more effective than they used to be. You probably can see from my gray hair that I've been around for a while. I grew up on a small little farm where we didn't have any pesticides. I don't know if they existed, but we sure as heck couldn't afford them. So what it was is what it was. Nowadays, of course, the pesticides are readily available, widely used on farms, and unfortunately, widely used in our lawns and our gardens. And then, of course, humans are very effective in moving things all across the world. And so we have moved some pests that attack honeybees and other plants from foreign countries into North America. So a major problem is monoculture. So monoculture means having a large area with a single type of plant. Now, if you're a farmer, this is good news because there's a lot of efficiency here, but it means that if you're growing a crop that needs pollination, it means that the native bees, they're not going to be available in sufficient numbers, so you have to move in honeybees. And as soon as the crop finishes flowering, there's no food for the honeybees or any native bees that happen to be in the area. And so for honeybees, we can move them out. For native bees, they're stuck and they're going to have no food. So this is picture here. Used to be a lot of spare land, weed area, and that's all now converted to monoculture. So here's a picture of bees in almonds, and on the right, a picture of bees in apple orchards. And you're probably saying, well, I'm not a farmer. I don't live near any large farms. I don't have to worry about monoculture. Well, wrong. This is what we have for monoculture. Mile after mile after mile of nothing but grass. And grass doesn't provide any food for honeybees, native bees, butterflies, anything. And in fact, because we mow it all the time, it doesn't even provide any seeds for birds or other animals to eat. Insecticides. Insecticides are designed to kill insects. Honeybees, native bees, they're insects. Butterflies, they're insects. They're going to get killed off when we use insecticides. Herbicides. Herbicides are designed to kill plants. We usually think of them as killing weeds. But what you have to think about is weeds feed bees and other pollinators. We have to start changing the mindset of homeowners. Right now, everybody wants to have that beautiful lawn cut in nice diagonal stripes with nothing but grass. It used to be, and I'm a strong advocate, that we need to have clover in our lawns. The white clover that I'm showing here used to be called lawn clover because it was in lawns. It's an excellent food source for all types of pollinators, and it actually provides fertilizers for the grass growing in the lawn. So a mixture of clover and grass is actually very beneficial for the homeowner's lawn. On the left, I saw this website called The Perfect Lawn. There it is. What we need is flowers. Many more flowers. Now, you say, I don't have time, I'm too busy, I can't grow flowers. Plant clover. This is a picture I took this morning. It's about a half mile up the road from where I live. one of the very few lawns in our area that actually have a beautiful stand of white clover. Every place else, it's nothing but grass. Canada, as is usual, they're ahead of us. They banned some years ago now what they call cosmetic use of pesticides. So not pesticides for agricultural use, but pesticides used in towns, in schools, in parks, in lawns. All that has been banned for some years now. One state, Maryland, is on the road. They banned the use of a certain type, a certain class of insecticide called neonicotinoids. They have some exceptions, but basically homeowners are not allowed to use them in the state of Maryland. Now you're probably thinking, no, I'm ecologically minded. I don't use pesticides in my lawn or in my garden. And if that's true, wonderful. However, you have to think more broadly because you encourage pesticide use. So if we look at these apples, I'm picking on apples because it's easy to get pictures of defective apples. When you go to the store, you're going to grab the perfect apple and you're going to reject any of the apples that have any blemishes. And how do you get that perfect apple? You spray like crazy, okay? So honeybees, as I've hinted at, they are not native to North America. All of them were originally imported from Europe. Now we have some from Africa as well. But our crops, we've also imported our crops. So on the left, you have some crops that are native to the Americas. Honeybees will work them. And on the right is a longer list of crops and plants that we have imported so that they are a perfect match for honeybees. Okay. So that all builds up to what can you do? We need to change the thinking about lawns. Most of us live in suburban areas. We've got to get people to stop thinking nothing but green grass makes a perfect, beautiful lawn. Right? We have to really start thinking about flowers, about clover. We have to start thinking about alternate ground covers. And one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do, I haven't had the chance to put on my website yet, but I will later. You should read Doug Talamay's book, Bringing Nature Home. And I know he has a new one coming out. I haven't read it yet, okay? The other thing that you can do is practice pesticide-free gardening. Plant more flowers. We don't need so much green grass. Nowadays, people are starting to advocate pollinator lawns that you can maintain. Cartoon, I stole off the web someplace, but this makes the point. We need flowers to feed our pollinators, okay? We have to change the mindset of our local governments. I sit on the Pennsylvania Apiary Advisory Board. We've been trying for years to get the Department of Transportation to stop mowing the sides of roads, only mow once a year. Be a big savings in money, but they keep telling us we can't do that because if we don't mow, the local people complain that the sides of the road look terrible. So we need to change people's thinking to allow flowers and weeds to grow along the sides of the road. In our townships, when we have parks, we need to have more flowers, more clover in the green areas. We need to encourage townships to allow beekeeping. Every little township, borough, whatever, can and do sometimes pass laws outlawing beekeeping in their area. One of the things that I try to do is I try to go to schools and talk to the children about the importance of bees and pollinators. So I try to encourage the children to go out and look at the flowers and see the bees. And I tell them when the bees are on the flowers, they're busy gathering food. They don't care about you. The only time they're going to actually sting you is if you happen to step on them when she has bare feet, and you really can't blame her. Okay. I have some information on my website that give you my link here, but if you go to vincemasterbeekeeper.com, useful links, I have information about plants for pollinators from various groups, and I have some useful links for beekeeping with children. So you can email me at delval, Vincent Dalaloyo at delval.edu, or my private email address, vincentdalaloyo@gmail.com, and my website, vincemasterbeekeeper.com, where I have lots of useful links.